There's also been, all sorts of voices or activity that I've been noticing basically from Asia. So you have the Chinese regime basically saying to, Hong Kong and Taiwan, from a information perspective, it appears to be very, very serious.
In the first place, no sane person would make any comparison between Afghanistan and Taiwan. I mean, Afghanistan is a landlocked country. Taiwan is an island. Afghanistan is one of the most primitive countries in the world. Taiwan, one of the most advanced in the world. And where the Afghan army was well equipped, it disintegrated under internal pressure. The armed forces of Taiwan are extremely well equipped and extremely well trained and very numerous, and they would defend their island with great courage and ingenuity, I'm sure. And we can also count on the unquantifiable and invisible ally of the obnoxious diplomatic personality of the People's Republic of China, that they are very overbearing with their neighbors. They are detested by the Vietnamese, ostensibly their glorious allies in the Vietnam War. They are detested by the South Koreans. They are not liked at all by the Japanese, where there's an ancient rivalry, the two leading powers of the Far East. They are not liked at all by the Indians, in whose territory they have made incursions, and they have to some extent actually invaded India. These countries will not be easily intimidated, and they will not hastily cast off the possibilities provided by the by an association with the United States. The United States, let us face the fact, is responsible for Taiwan becoming a serious country. And the United States rescued South Korea with allies playing a secondary role. The United States designed the present government of Japan and put Japan back on its feet. Now, you never expect gratitude from other countries for things you do, but those countries and others are aware that the United States is capable of, and most of the time is, a very effective, powerful ally. They're not going to show them the door anytime soon. And the Chinese have shown, and we must remember that China historically never took any interest in the world beyond its borders. This is a first for them. There have been periods in the past, several, when China was a mighty power. But even at those times, it only demanded exaggerated respect from its immediate neighbors. There wasn't much interested in the world. That has changed. But they haven't picked up the lessons that quickly. I mean, they were so overbearing. Even the colonels in Myanmar threw them out. They couldn't stand it anymore. And they are technically, at or on the edge of a state of skirmishing, i.e. the lowest form of war, but skirmishing all the same, with India, with Vietnam. And the Chinese have not demonstrated any great aptitude for using diplomacy to make themselves more popular or sought after in the world. So, they're amateurs. They're just starting out. And China itself, of course, must never be underestimated. But this has been a bad embarrassment for the United States. But it does not destroy the fact that in just 3 lifetimes since the Battle of Yorktown, the United States has, in that time, for the last 80 years or so, been the preeminent country in the world. It was an important player in the Allied victory in World War I. It was a decisive and indispensable player in the Allied victory in World War II. It was the undisputed, overwhelming leader in the Western victory in the Cold War. And it is the greatest power in the world. And all countries make mistakes. This was a bad one, but it can be recovered from.
I can't help but think as we're talking about this, I don't usually go here, but there's this Thucydides trap. There's been this idea, right, and I guess circles of foreign policy and history that the U.S. is the declining power, China is the rising power. Does this provide the propaganda coup to kind of truly demonstrate that?
Well, no, it provides a propaganda coup. It is certainly a propaganda coup that will reinforce the Chinese side of the argument you just set out. But it need not it need not be true, and I personally don't think it is true. I don't think the United States is in decline. I think it is in an unusually confused internal condition, assimilating a decisive positive turning point in the racial relations problem that has always been there. Since shortly after the arrival of the Europeans, it was a slave-holding country for 250 years, what Mr. Lincoln called the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil. And there was a terrible war, and then there was 100 years of segregation. And I think we are now at the point where radical African American groups are completely overplaying their hand, and yet they have attracted a certain amount of adherence from non-black groups that the United States had this original sin of slavery and hasn't adequately atoned for it. But that's not where the majority is, and because of the unusual personality of Donald Trump and the peculiar nature of the Biden phenomenon, the Democrats are now an informal and almost incoherent coalition of different elements, outright socialists, this somewhat violent, in any case, very refractory group, still purporting to relive and assert vengeance for the moral shame of slavery and its aftermath, and then the traditional Democratic Party, which is essentially a reasonable, rather moderate group contesting with the Republicans to run the government, and it's all come at the same time, but it'll all disentangle quite quickly, and the United States will revert to being a rationally governed, reasonably competently governed, great power, exercising and defending its national interests with its allies. But I think this rather painful period of working out the internal complexities of the United States and getting the right personnel in place opposite the world and asserting legitimately, neither belligerently nor with too much laxity, the legitimate interest of the United States. I think we've got this presidential term and congressional term to go through to get there, but they'll get there. And I think the United States is more or less at its plateau. I don't think it will get markedly more important vis-a-vis all the rest of the world than it is now. But there is no real evidence it's in decline. Americans are, almost all of them, as you know, patriotic people. They love the country, and it is fundamentally an extremely powerful country. I mean, China is a poor country. There's a lot of people, but has very little resources. And it has no institutions that enjoy or deserve the slightest respect, except up to a point, the army, the military. You can't believe a word the Chinese government says or a statistic they publish. It's a substantially more corrupt country than the United States, which by the standards of Britain or Canada or Sweden or Germany is really quite a corrupt country. So the United States is all right. It's just having a bad period, but a brief one. And it could go into an inexorable Spenglerian decline. It could. But there's no need to believe that it will. It is certainly not inevitable, and I do not think it will. I think there will be a reaction against what's happening now, and a powerful sentiment over the next few years to say, in the United States, let's stop this nonsense. Let's stop horrible fiascos like Afghanistan from happening again. Let's define our national interest in the world, provide the resources to protect it in consultation with serious allies, work it all out, and continue the fundamentally highly successful history of the United States. It's an interruption like the Civil War, but not as severe, but unfortunately not one in which the country is guided by so outstanding and brilliant a leader as Abraham Lincoln.